Hello, everybody. Welcome to Kerridwen Green, and this is Living Green blog. I'm Alexandra Nicolau, founder and CEO of Kerridwen Green Real Estate, and today we're joined by Mathias, an architect from Germany who is known for his precision, but is also has a concept called green luxury that we would like to learn about today. Hello, Mathias. Welcome.
Hello. Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So before we get into sustainability, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background in your architectural journey until the point of there, because I remember we went to an expose recently with you, which was very interesting, and you showed us all these grand skyscrapers and a lot of metal. So I was wondering a little bit if you could explain your background on architecture.
I think my background, even to childhood, I was fascinated with technology, but I was fascinated with technology somehow also that made green technology, and that's even from childhood. So first things were when people were going to the moon, my parents had the book about that, and that was fascinating me. And then as a young kid, we were having school exchange to Paris, and I saw the Centre Pompidou from Richard Rogers, and I was like, oh, what's that? That's so different to everything that I knew. I grew up in the countryside and in the north of Germany. So then I had this kind of, okay, there's technology and there is something fascinating into architecture, which I think brought me to architecture ultimately. Also, I was always fascinated with art, and this was kind of bringing everything together. Yeah. So then studying in Germany, studying in Milan for a while, getting into the design world also. Ultimately, I then went to work in London, and I used to work with Norman Foster for a few years, and then for quite a lot of time with Richard Rogers. And well, building anything from skyscrapers to airports, luxury residential buildings, so quite big buildings. Right. And usually my main focus there was into kind of technology. Very high-end facades, innovative facades, bespoke facades. And all the through, there was always this element of sustainability too. So what could these facades do? They could make the building a bit more sustainable, a bit more innovative. And then whenever possible, we were trying to plant, say, a tree in an airport, which I can tell you is very difficult to do, but we have done this. So it was always this. And then ultimately I decided I want to have my own studio. I felt I've been learning from the best for a long time, and it was time to seek some sunshine. And a little bit by kind of coincidence, I came to Mallorca, and now we're here.
Okay. So how did the concept of green luxury came in? Because I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that for you, the green luxury is combining ultra luxury homes or properties with the precision and the technology that you are accustomed to working with. Is this correct, or do you envisage it differently?
No, that's correct. So for me, it was interesting. When I left London, I went to travel for around the world for a year. I wanted to study green architecture, sustainable architecture around the world, do a few small projects traveling around the world, because everything I did before was very big projects. I mean, I had no illusion that my first project would be an airport when I opened my own office. So I traveled a little bit. I came with this idea of bringing green architecture to Mallorca when I first came here. And at least initially, I realized that was not what the typical client wanted.
Right.
So I thought, in my head, it was kind of self-evident, but it was actually not so easy to find the clients for that. And then I found like, okay, what do the clients want? They want luxury. At least those were the clients that I met mainly. And then what do I want? I want the green, the sustainable architecture. So how about we combine those two? And I think that makes really perfect sense. So we coined this word, green luxury, and bringing these two worlds together. And I think that is now happening. So some of our projects lean more to the sustainability side. Some are a little bit more luxury, but I think all of them always have these two things somehow at heart. Yeah, coexisting. And depending a little bit on the client, I mean, from my point of view, I would love to go full sustainable autark houses, and that could still be incredibly cool as an architecture. So, but it depends. You have to take the clients with you on that journey.
Of course.
But
And educate them, because there's a lack of knowledge about, and as you say, people tend to think luxury one and sustainability is the other, and they don't understand that they can be blended together to make something that's sustainable and luxurious at the same time.
I think they can be perfectly blended together. And I think for me it's really fascinating, because out of all of this is developing a kind of style. And I think that's what really interests me. You know, okay, what is coming out of this? How do these houses also look? Do they maybe look a little bit different? You know, and for all these reasons, so there's a reason behind it. And I think that is really kind of fascinating to me.
Well, and you do have a very particular stamp and style that I invite anybody who's watching, listening to this, to visit your website. And I think it's something that you can immediately see Mathias Koester design. It's quite
well, thank you.
to identify. So when you approach your clients, or your clients approach you, and you have a project and they say, we want to do this house and we want these and these elements, how do you approach the sustainable side, and what do you recommend to incorporate into the designs to make them more sustainable?
I think in the end, almost independent of how sustainable one in the end goes, there's always a very detailed analysis of the site. I mean, what is the climatic conditions?
Right.
What is the kind of direction that the house would be in a direction? Is there a particular nature that is on the plot that we should preserve? You know, where are the good views? Is there a very close neighbor? Is there problems with privacy? Yeah. Is there all this kind of, is there a loud street somewhere?
Maybe essential to anybody building a luxury home.
Yeah, so this is the same to any project, I guess. And then the sustainability comes in already. Then okay, especially in Mallorca, I'm also a big fan of having these big windows. I mean, especially if you have got a plot with view, you want to maximize that view, but then you should shade it, right? And a lot of houses don't have that. That seems kind of evident. But you should have large canopies.
To you, but sorry to interrupt you there, but maybe for people listening, they don't really know why it is important to shade, and this is for energy consumption, right?
Yes, because if you have a big box, big windows, nowadays these windows are very good. You can get very kind of solar protective windows, but ultimately you're gonna cool your house with air conditioning in summer.
Right.
So having the right kind of strategy of shading, you can omit a lot of that.
Yeah.
So, and then maybe for, let's say, springtime and autumn time here in Mallorca, when it's already very warm, you might not need any air conditioning. You just open the window, you make sure that you get a bit of a natural breeze, and it's fantastic. You know, by just opening some windows, you can achieve all your air conditioning. And then maybe in summer you might need some because it gets really, really hot, but then we might put a couple of solar panels on the roof. Why not? There's even some beautiful ones nowadays. And then that might just drive your air conditioning need that you have. So I think we can pretty much build an autark house now. And I think we should. We probably still get connected to the grid. Okay, if the grid is there already, but I think let's aim to be energy neutral. That would be fantastic.
I think that's a luxury in itself, not having to depend on anything, not having the bills that you would have, obviously, because these large houses consume an awful lot, and having this energy efficiency makes a huge difference to the pocket and, of course, to the environment.
Yes, totally. And because the technology has gone so much better. So I think that's the other thing. So there is one thing, which is the architectural design, just the way that the house is built. There's some canopies, the directions that we are facing, and so on, the integration of nature also into the house. But then there's technology, which I believe can or cannot influence the look of the house. There is almost like a choice. So it can be almost invisible. You can make it as part of a feature. And I think there I like almost both. And I think that's in the end totally up to the clients, but it would be nice to use it. I think
that would be. You have a very contemporary design. So obviously technology kind of works with that as well.
It works with that, but sometimes there might be some other designs where the client is not too fond of the solar panel look or something like that, but then we can, in a way, maybe hide it a bit more. But I think it should always be there.
Yeah. And apart from energy efficiency, do you look at any, or do you plan to, or do you try to speak to your clients to look at any other perspective, like building materials, for example?
Yeah, so we're doing a house now two houses actually in Barcelona. And that's great. I'm doing that with a project manager that I know for quite some time. And he has built a few years later, his house is totally zero energy. It has got only healthy materials, let's say. Right. Mainly basically completely built on a wooden frame and wooden kind of ceilings. Okay. And so I think, but this is another step. So there you have to really go into detail. So then you have to do a very advanced detail design, which I love because this is what we used to do in London, which is not something that people usually do very much here in Mallorca. Right. Usually you got a concept and then you go, oh great, okay, we can build this now. And yeah, you can. If you do it traditionally, with concrete, with blockwork, you might not need that many kind of sophisticated details. You just do what you always do. But in order to go like a step ahead, to do healthy, sustainable construction regarding also all the materials, you have to spend a bit more research and a bit more time into the execution.
Which is basically where you got your title for the expose that I went to visit, that was Precision Meets Nature, right? So is this where you see the future going? I mean, you mentioned now this house was built in wood. You've always worked a lot with metals. So where do you foresee the future of sustainable architecture going?
Yeah, I think I personally like this kind of precise materials, or let's say materials which are elements. So for me, like timber beams or steel beams, but it's kind of elements that you put together. And then you have some glass in between that, and then you have some shading, but it's a relatively open and lightweight construction. I just quite like that. And then you put that into contrast with a very, very heavy natural stone wall here in Mallorca. You know, and out of that you create the kind of contrast and interest of something that is, say, maybe more traditional from the island, and something that it is the new kind of way of building, let's say. Right. And I think this precision, we always work super precise in these kind of skyscrapers. You have a lot of prefabrication. Yes. Like 2 years before, you know exactly on what day something comes on site. It is very much controlled. And in Mallorca, it's, let's say, the exact opposite in a way. And for me, it's more like to say, okay, look, I'm here because I love the nature. Nature in Mallorca is so beautiful, and also the kind of vernacular architecture. I mean, it's fantastic. But now, do we bring something also from the future here, which I think is also a reasonable thought.
Yes, and covering all design aesthetics, because everybody has different tastes and styles, obviously.
Exactly. So therefore, precision meets nature. This is a little bit the idea, and we don't want to. It wouldn't also fit. You know, we're not gonna build something super high tech, but a balanced approach. You know, something new, something that is more traditional, and bringing these things together.
And of course, you mentioned now that the project that you were working on is in Barcelona. You're based here in Mallorca, but you are able to work internationally, correct?
Yes. So what we do is, we have projects also in the Caribbean. We have now a project in Mexico, but the big majority of projects is here now in Mallorca. Right. Okay. And I think this is a little bit coming. Having worked in London, we worked in projects, or I personally worked on projects mainly in Europe. We had some projects in Australia that I was involved, but I was involved in projects in Europe mainly, but everywhere in Europe. And it always was, okay, we were mainly working on the design, and we had a partner architect who was local to wherever the project was, who knew all about the legislation. And in this kind of partnership, kind of interesting things develop, no? Because people with a different background come together and create something special. And I think that is the same also here in Mallorca.
Yes.
Not always, but I very
one another.
often, we work with a Mallorquin partner architect, because of course he's much longer on the island. He knows a few things a little bit better than us,
The ins
that
and
we are
outs,
relatively
yeah.
new. But in this kind of approach, we can, in theory, work everywhere in the world. And I also like that. I like this kind of exchange with different cultures.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So do you think that this is a route that other architects are following suit? Or do you think it's still very at initial stages?
No, I think to my mind, it's almost become mainstream. The interesting thing is, when I came here 7 years ago, I wanted to promote the green design idea. Now, thankfully, it's like everywhere.
Yes.
It is, I guess, it is the kind of new norm, thankfully, but it is not anymore. Like in my mind, I've been doing that like all the 20 years of my career, trying to push this. Now it's mainstream. And now we're wondering in our marketing, okay, what is it actually that makes us different? Because thankfully everybody is everybody, but a lot of people are now looking out for that much more. So I think,
well, it is thankfully growing, and this is part of what we're trying to do here with these videos, is let people know that it exists, because a lot of the public still aren't aware of concepts such as passive housing, or, as you said, healthy non-toxic materials, or different things, or maybe just shading, as you mentioned, or planting a tree here or planting it there, how it can affect. So this is really one of the purposes of these interviews, is a little bit to let people know that this exists, because within architecture, obviously, they're growing every day that way, but we do have to educate the buyers and the builders at the end of the day, for them to realize that these options are already a reality. It's not just in the future.
no, not at all. And also a lot of these, like the technology of things has become a lot more affordable. I think so. It is really, from a financial point of view, there's almost no reason why you wouldn't do it. There might be other reasons, there might be aesthetic reasons or a lot of other things, but even from an economic point of view, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's a huge point, because it's one of the things that I think set people back is, oh, I'd love to build an eco-friendly house, but I can't afford it, or it's going to, make my budget go out the roof. And so that's a huge important point that you're making right there.
Yeah, but I also think it is that maybe a few elements still are expensive, but it depends, if with the simple elements you can already get your house to being, say, 75% sustainable, then why don't we at least for sure do that? Yeah. And then there might be other things for the last percentage to get it perfect. That might be a little bit more expensive. And then if one can afford it, great, let's do the whole package. Right. But if not, let's do the kind of basics that in the end doesn't really cost you anything. No, it's just a matter of
than nothing.
Clever design, let's say.
Every little helps.
Every little helps.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, Mathias. I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add before we close the session.
No, this is a pleasure. That's all I like to add. This is very nice. I mean, it's also nice to see we're here now. I'm on the island since 7 years now. I've got my own studio for almost 4 now, and having worked on quite a lot of projects already. And it is nice to see that there is an interest now developing in what we are doing. And so I'm very happy to do this interview. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. From on a personal point and on a personal note, I feel the same. I've been working in with sustainable products and practices for over 20 years. So it's nice to see now everybody come together and there be kind of a mutual understanding that this is the direction we need to be embracing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we look forward to the next session.
Yes, very much so. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.